My name's Eva Hale. I grew up in a house where everyone saluted my sister without raising a hand. If you looked at our family photo wall in Madison, North Carolina, you'd think I was the neighbor's kid who snuck into the frame. Every shelf had a medal with Madison's name on it. My name? Probably spelled wrong on a birth certificate in some drawer under expired coupons. My sister, Madison, was the golden one. She won track meets, debate tournaments, and ROTC awards. My parents didn't hang pictures of her, they built a shrine. By the time she was 15, my dad called her Lieutenant Madison like it was her legal name. He didn't just believe she'd join the army, spoke about it like she'd already won a war. Me? I was the quiet one. Not rebellious. Not dramatic. I followed the rules, aced tests, and helped around the house. But in a family that worshipped combat boots and chest-thumping speeches, being bright and calm made me invisible. My mom would say things like, "Eva's so responsible," which, in our house, was code for forgettable but helpful. I remember one moment like it was branded into my memory. I was 16. Madison had this big ROTC essay due in a national scholarship competition. She got stuck and asked me to look at it. I didn't just help, I rewrote the whole thing. I stayed up till 3 a.m., researched tactical theories, and cited sources she didn't know existed. The following week, she won. My dad called it the best damn piece of writing he'd ever read from a high schooler. Madison winked at me behind his back. She never corrected him. I didn't expect credit. Not really. But the silence stayed longer than I expected. And it started to echo. I didn't matter, and the proof wasn't in the yelling, it was in the absence of anything at all. I wasn't ignored because I failed. I was ignored because I didn't take up space the way they wanted. Here's where you might think I got angry and lashed out. I didn't. I just learned to keep things to myself, like I was looking into military programs alone. I downloaded the ASVAB prep manual under my bed. I memorized mission structures like other kids memorized band lyrics. I didn't tell Annie not because I was scared, but because I already knew the reaction. A smirk, maybe a pat on the head. That's cute, Eva. And yeah, you could say this is a revenge story, but not the kind where someone flips tables or screams in court. This kind of builds over the years. Quietly, patiently, like pressure under a steel lid. Suppose you've ever felt like the background character in your own family. Comment below. And hit subscribe. Trust me, this one's going somewhere. The night Madison got invited to tour West Point, my dad pulled out the nice whiskey. She had barely stepped through the door before he handed her the glass and said, "You were born for this." I watched from the stairs. No one noticed I was home. So, I stopped waiting for anyone to notice and started making decisions they'd never see coming. I enlisted without telling a soul. Not my parents. Not Madison. Not even my best friend, who I'm pretty sure still thought I was planning to major in psychology. I used the library computer at my community college to fill out every form, sweating over glitchy Wi-Fi and hoping no one walked by. The ASVAB came easy. The physical was tougher, but I passed. Then, one morning, a plain envelope appeared in my mailbox. My official acceptance. No one clapped, no one even knew. I sat in the dark of my bedroom that night, holding that letter like it might catch fire. The paper didn't feel heavy, but what it meant did. It meant I was stepping into a world no one expected me to touch, and I wasn't asking anyone's permission. At dinner the next night, Madison was going off about an upcoming field leadership course. My dad leaned in like it was gospel. "Combat instinct," he said, "can't be taught. You either have it or you don't." Then he looked at me and added, "You'd make a good intelligence clerk or something, Eva. You're organized." I didn't flinch. I just nodded like I hadn't already signed the damn papers. Like I wasn't shipping out in less than a month. They talked around me like I was furniture. And maybe I had been for a long time. Basic was brutal. Not because I couldn't handle it, but because no one thought I could. That was the fuel. Whenever someone raised an eyebrow at me or gave me that half smile of, "You sure you belong here?" I pushed harder. I ran until my legs screamed. Studied until the numbers blurred. Shot better than half my unit. One instructor started calling me quiet fire, and it stuck. Still, I didn't call home. What was I supposed to say? Hey Dad, turns out I'm not the office girl after all. I figured they'd hear eventually. Or they wouldn't. Either way, I was fine. When I graduated from 8 with honors in signals intelligence, I sent a photo to my mom's number. No caption. No expectation. She responded 3 days later with a thumbs up emoji. By the time I got my first assignment overseas supporting a joint tactical unit in Kuwait, I'd learned something important. People like my family don't see value in what they can't label as loud. If you're not kicking down doors or blowing something up, they call it admin. Never mind that my job stopped attacks before they happened. Never mind that the maps I built kept teams alive. During one mission, I spotted a relay node hidden in what looked like a roadside shack. On a hunch, I rerouted our recon drone 5 clicks off course. They found an IED factory inside. No explosion. No blood. No recognition. That wasn't the story anyone back home wanted to tell at barbecues. I Skyped once, months later. My dad answered, barely glancing at the screen. Heard from Madison lately? He asked. I told him no. He said, she's being considered for Ranger School. You should call her. She probably misses you. I wanted to laugh. I did. But I just stared at the screen, at the face of a man who had no idea what his daughter did for a living. And didn't care enough to ask. So I stopped trying. Let them think about what they want. Let Madison be the headline. I'd stick to the shadows. It's where I worked best anyway. I leaned into the silence because, in that quiet, I got sharper. While Madison was out posting group photos in tactical gear, I was reading satellite sweeps like other people read street signs. I could tell you which signals were chatter and which were covered. I didn't wear body armor, I wore a headset. My weapon wasn't an M4, it was a keyboard linked to encrypted systems most people in uniform didn't even know existed. My section worked out of a converted storage unit with humming servers and whiteboards full of red scribbles. I lived on instant coffee and adrenaline. We weren't the ones getting medals in front of generals, but without us, those guys wouldn't have a clear route in or out. And still, whenever someone mentioned intel, it came with air quotes like it was something nerdy you tolerated but didn't respect. They stopped doing that after Bahrain. We were supporting a multinational convoy near the port. The reports we had were Kleno expected disruption. But something in the comm logs didn't add up. A frequency kept repeating in short bursts, just barely off pattern. It's not encrypted or formatted, it's wrong enough to feel off. I flagged it. My captain shrugged, could be junk data. I stayed late and ran the frequency through archived insurgent patterns from 2 years back. It matched a dormant relay used to mask roadside devices. No one believed me at first. Until I traced the source to a warehouse 10 clicks from the convoy's path. I asked for a drone reroute. They gave me 5 minutes. We caught 4 men loading barrels into a van rigged with scrap metal and homemade explosives. The warehouse blew up 30 minutes after our strike team cleared it. The convoy passed through untouched. The story made internal reports. My name didn't. I didn't care. Not really. What I cared about was knowing we stopped something. That lives got to keep living. But you try explaining that to people back home. When I called my mom after that, just to hear her voice, she talked about Madison's new Instagram photo with her unit sisters. Said Madison looked powerful in a way that made her proud. I told her I'd helped prevent a convoy from getting blown apart. She paused. Then asked, do you ever get to work with your sister? I kept it short after that. The work only got harder. Longer hours. Less sleep. More weight in my gut every time I clicked into another live feed. A kind of fatigue comes from being needed but never seen. And that was becoming my specialty. One night, I got an encrypted ping. Recon unit caught static anomalies near a forward patrol route. They were nervous but unsure. I studied the file, flagged 3 relayed patterns, and cross-referenced them against known detonation methods. They were walking into a trap. I sent an immediate stop order and rerouted them around the threat radius. If I'd hesitated 5 minutes, they'd be dead. I didn't get a medal. I got a thank you message from a lieutenant whose boots I'd never seen. It was 2 lines. I printed it anyway, taped it inside my locker. Quiet victory. I kept doing the job. Saved who I could. predicted more than I missed. Every time I opened my inbox, I found nothing from my family. The only message I ever got from Madison was a forwarded email chain from my dad with her photo standing in front of a black hawk. She added one line, "Thought this one might impress you." It didn't. But something in me shifted. I wasn't just doing my job anymore. I was doing it because I knew what it felt like to be the one no one counted on, and I refused to let anyone under my watch be forgotten. Then, one morning, a new deployment order hit my inbox with a familiar last name attached. Madison Hale. Assigned to the same operational zone in northern Pakistan. I read it twice, thought it might be a glitch. But no, she was listed as the lead field officer, and I was the senior intel advisor assigned to support her unit. I laughed. Not out loud, just that tight laugh that sits in your chest and doesn't move. Of all the people on Earth they could have paired me with, they picked the one who still thought I was playing soldier. When I landed at the forward operations post, I immediately spotted her in the tent. Same straight posture, same perfect bun, same smug energy. She turned, did a quick double take, and raised an eyebrow. "Well, look who finally made it out of the server room." I didn't take the bait. "Let's just make sure your team doesn't walk into a trap." She smirked like it was a joke. "Relax. We've got boots on the ground. You just keep the data clean." Madison had always been like that, charismatic, direct, cocky. She was the kind of officer soldiers liked because she had a big voice and moved as if she'd already won. But leadership isn't about swagger. It's about listening before you act, and that had never been her strong suit. Our mission zone was a stretch of rural terrain along the Afghan border. The assignment: monitor for transport of illegal weapons and biochemical labs suspected to be buried within a series of farming compounds. Recon had picked up partial heat signatures, but satellite coverage was limited, and locals weren't talking. I spent days scanning frequencies and triangulating signals from broken cell towers and drones. Eventually, I caught a pattern brief ping sent at irregular intervals, masked under irrigation tech frequencies. I pulled the data, ran the analysis, and confirmed the source. A remote storage facility in a low valley. No civilian chatter nearby. Isolated. Strategic. Too clean. I called a meeting with the ops team. "We wait for the next recon pass," I said, pointing to the projection map. "Once it confirms heat signatures, we mark the perimeter and pull back. No contact, no engagement." Everyone nodded except Madison. She leaned back in her chair, boots crossed, spinning a pen between her fingers. "There's a convoy moving through that valley tonight," she said. "Intel says it's loaded." I pushed the report forward. "That's unverified. We've got blind spots. If you go in early, you're walking into the unknown." She shrugged. "Sometimes unknown is where the answers are. Sometimes unknown gets people killed." Madison didn't flinch. "We strike tonight at 2,350. I'll take full responsibility." She said it like a badge of courage. Like daring the worst somehow made her more right. And no one questioned her, not because they believed her, but because her tone left no room. Later that evening, I got a knock on my tent. The CO handed me a printed mission change form with my name neatly typed at the bottom. "Orders came from up top," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You're still lead on recon, but the time's moved up. Field command insists the window's now." I asked if there'd been updated satellite data. There hadn't. I asked who pushed the change. He hesitated. "Captain Hale." "But it's been cleared." He meant Madison. I signed it. The chain of command said I had to, not because I agreed. In the Army, you don't get to stall a mission because of gut feeling 7 if yours have been right more times than hers. At 2,350, I led 2 recon teams across 5 kilometers of rocky trail, navigating under near-zero visibility. The moon was buried in cloud cover. My headset buzzed with static. I could barely make out our footsteps, let alone movement ahead. Then I heard it. A click. A breath. A mechanical twitch. My stomach dropped. And then the valley lit up like a furnace. I hit the ground so fast that I didn't realize I was screaming until the dust filled my mouth. The explosion ripped through the night like the earth cracked open. My headset cut out. Just static and shouting. Somewhere up ahead, someone was screaming ragged, sharp. I scrambled behind a jagged rock formation and tried to understand what happened. The valley was supposed to be quiet. My map didn't account for buried tripwire or secondary charges. But whoever was in there knew we were coming. Alpha 2, status. I shouted into the comm but got nothing. I switched frequencies and switched again. Nothing but silence and that high ringing in my ears. Then, a second blast hit. Smaller, but closer. I felt the heat brush my left shoulder. That one was directional. Controlled. They were corralling us, whoever they were. Movement caught my eye. Logan, stumbling out of the smoke with blood down his face. He was yelling something I couldn't hear. I bolted toward him. A body dropped between us. Sergeant Hill. Still. His vest was shredded. I didn't check for a pulse. I knew. Logan collapsed next to me, gasping, gripping his thigh. Blood soaked through the fabric fast. I ripped open my medkit with shaking hands, packed the wound, and tied a tourniquet. He was trying to say something, pointing, panicked. There on the ridge north side, I finally caught. I radioed for air evac, called out coordinates, marked smoke, and everything by protocol. But the birds were slow, and the valley wasn't clear. The enemy fire started pinging the rocks around us. Somewhere, someone returned fire, chaos. I dragged Logan back across uneven ground, half carrying, half sliding. Every step felt like moving through the concrete. I slipped twice. Once, I landed hard on my elbow. Didn't matter. I wasn't leaving him. 3 soldiers went in. 3 didn't make it out. 6 came back broken, limping, burned, deafened. I couldn't stop counting their names. Couldn't stop seeing the look on Hill's face. Not fear. Just blank. Like he never had a chance to react. Back at the outpost, I collapsed near the helipad, knees hitting gravel so hard I didn't notice until later they were bleeding. The wind from the evacuation rotor burned my skin. My uniform was soaked with blood, some mine, most not. The whole night played on repeat in my head, but slower. Every mistake. Every time, I didn't push harder. I didn't see Madison until hours later. She was standing near the mission board, arms crossed, jaw locked. She didn't look at me. Didn't ask how many were down. Just nodded when the CO debriefed us and said, "Sometimes these things happen." I nearly threw a chair. Instead, I walked out. The next day, I was called into the CO's tent again. Different tone this time, tight, formal. He slid a file across the table. Mission report, timeline, decision logs, deployment orders. It had my name all over it. "Did you approve the time change?" he asked. I signed the change form under orders. R. From who? Captain Madison Hale. He didn't respond. Just underlined a line on the document. The time of deployment is officially logged under my authority. There was no mention of Madison's override. No comm log, no trace. Chain of command. I said quietly. He nodded, but his eyes didn't agree. The inquiry wasn't a courtroom, but it might as well have been. A folding table. 3 officers. A recorder. No warmth. No questions that allowed context. Only checkboxes. Who authorized the early deployment? I was advised it had been cleared. By who? I paused. Saying her name out loud at that moment felt like a betrayal, but the bigger betrayal was silence. Captain Madison Hale. A heavy pause. One officer wrote something but didn't look it up. No further comment. Madison didn't show. She submitted a statement. 2 paragraphs, vague, clinical. Something about intel shift and shared responsibility. She didn't mention the meeting or the override. Didn't mention me. A week later, I got the report. Failure to adhere to mission protocol, resulting in preventable casualties. Recommendation. Immediate suspension pending further review. My rank was paused. My access was revoked. My clearance was flagged. But that wasn't the worst part. I called home. Not for comfort, just for something. My dad answered. His voice didn't crack, didn't rise, just flat, cold. "You made the call, Eva. People died. That's not on Madison. Oh. He hung up before I could say a word. I didn't call back. I packed my gear silently, one item at a time, like I was erasing myself from the inside out. No ceremony, no explanation. No one even made eye contact when I walked off that base. I handed over my badge, my comms, and my clearance card. Just like that, I was no longer Captain Eva Hale. Just a suspended name on a form flagged for internal review. They flew me to a holding facility in Wiesbaden for 3 days. Technically, it was just temporary quarters. Practically, it was a waiting room for people whose careers had been quietly put to sleep. I didn't unpack. I just stared at the ceiling and tried to remember when the floor had started falling out from under me. No one spoke to me unless they had to. When they did, it was clipped, procedural. Cold hands handing over cold reports. A colonel I'd never met asked me if I'd like to submit a statement of accountability. I said I already had at the field hearing. He blinked like he didn't remember. I asked if my appeal had been received. He said, "It's in the system." Translation: it's been buried. Back home, I was supposed to be on a mental health decompression period. That's what the Army calls it when they don't want to say suspended without trial. I flew back to North Carolina with a duffel bag, a half-dead phone, and a file that said "Do not access" on the corner. When I walked in the front door, my mom was folding laundry. She didn't even look up. My dad sat at the kitchen table reading the local paper. When he saw me, he didn't stand, just nodded toward the hallway. "You're in the guest room." Not, "Welcome home." Not, "We're glad you're okay." Just a logistical update. Like I was a guest in my own family. The next morning, I found the newspaper on the counter. Front page of the local section. Hale's other daughter faces military suspension after deadly intel failure. It didn't say my name, just the other daughter. A picture of Madison shaking hands with a general under the headline about her continuing excellence in field operations. I stood there with the paper in my hands, unable to breathe. My dad walked behind me, poured his coffee, and said nothing. Then finally, "You know, this could have gone differently. You had a responsibility." I turned slowly. I followed her orders. "She's not the one under review," he said, like it was that simple. I left the house 2 hours later and didn't go back. Rented a car. Drove north until the road stopped talking. Ended up in a small town in Montana. No one knew my name there. I found a month-to-month cabin on a back road near the woods. The guy who rented it to me said, "You military?" I said, "Not anymore." He didn't ask anything else. I got a job under the table at a bar that served elk burgers and didn't check resumes. Spent my days chopping wood I didn't need to burn. Spent my nights trying not to hear explosions that weren't happening. The dreams didn't come every night, but I woke up choking when they did. Sometimes I heard Hill's voice. Sometimes it was Logan screaming. Sometimes Madison called me overreactive, like she always did growing up. I stopped answering calls. Changed my number. Blocked every contact with the last name Hale. Even my mom. I told myself I wasn't bitter that I was healing. That was a lie. I was hiding. Because if I came up for air, I'd have to admit that everything I built just to be seen, and it hadn't been enough. A month into my exile, I drove down to town for groceries. There was a small newspaper stand outside the gas station. On the bottom corner of the rack was a military news brief. Buried, page 12. Command review closed on FWD 9, incident no new action. That was it. Just one line. No updates. No mention of Madison. No one cleared. No one blamed. Just closed. I stood there for 5 minutes, reading that sentence repeatedly. It was like if I stared hard enough, it would change. I bought the paper, walked out, sat in my truck, and thought about driving back to base so I could stand outside the fence and yell. But what would that change? They'd already moved on. They'd already decided who to protect. And I was no longer on the list. So I buried the paper under a firewood pile and tried to disappear with it. The first few weeks off-grid in Montana felt like slipping underwater. No phone, no ranks, no mirrors. I didn't shave, didn't check the date. The clock on the microwave blinked the wrong hour for 6 days before I finally unplugged it. The silence should have been peace, but it wasn't. It was just blank. And blank is dangerous. I woke up every night around 3:12 a.m. the same minute every time. Sometimes sweating, sometimes still as stone. Sometimes the dream was quiet, just the clicking sound before the blast. Sometimes it was Louderhill shouting, the rotor wash of the medevac, Madison's voice in my headset saying, "You're overthinking again, Eva." I tried to run it off. 5 miles through frozen dirt trails every morning. Wind biting my face until it went numb. Then I'd drink black coffee in silence, work a shift at the gas station where no one asked about my past, and head home to chop firewood I didn't burn. It wasn't a life, it was a placeholder. One night, I sat in the truck long after closing, staring at the dashboard like it might answer something. The cold from outside had seeped into the seat. I didn't notice until my hands started to shake. Not from temperature. From something deeper. That was when I saw him, limping across the lot in a VA hoodie and a brace that looked too new for his age. He pushed open the shop door, looking around like he was checking for ghosts. Then his eyes landed on me. "Hale?" he said, cautious. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "Specialist Logan. Second squad, you pulled me out that night." I blinked. "I thought you." He nodded. "Yeah, most people did. Docs took the knee. I kept the rest." He smiled. "But I'm still vertical. Thanks to you." "Oh." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't spoken to anyone from the unit since the suspension. He sat on the plastic bench near the lotto machine. "I've been looking for you." Quietly. "Just wanted to say you saved more than you lost, and that's not something they'll ever print." I stared at him. He added, "Whatever they told you, it wasn't the whole thing." He didn't stay long. Said he was heading west. Left behind a folded note with a scribbled number and 3 words. "You're not crazy." That night, I pulled out my old laptop. Dusty. Battery half dead. I plugged it in and let it warm up like an old engine. Then I opened my Secure Access app and was surprised it still works. Most of my credentials had been wiped, but one old backdoor remained from my Quantico rotation. Intel officers always have backups. I guess someone forgot to close mine. I logged in. The database loaded slowly. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Just something that proved I hadn't imagined it all. The original mission changed form. The comm logs. Anything that showed Madison had given the verbal order because I knew she had. I just didn't have it in writing. The Army doesn't make it easy. And I don't blame them. Their systems are built to protect operational integrity, not rogue officers looking to clear their name. But I wasn't looking for revenge. Not yet. I just wanted clarity. 2 hours in, I found nothing. Just routine mission chatter and redacted logistics. Then, I opened an archived logistics exchange server place usually used by support staff and transport dispatch. And there it was. Buried between 2 supply memos. A short internal message from CPTM Hale to Lieutenant Ops Officer. No formal header, no subject line. "We can't wait for her recon pass. Trust me. I'll take the heat if it goes south." No timestamp. Just a code string and a server hash. But it was there. Her words. Not mine. I copied it. Saved it. Then I stared at it for almost 20 minutes. My pulse didn't spike. My jaw didn't clench. I just sat there, absolutely still. It didn't make me feel better. It made me feel dangerous. I didn't sleep that night, just watched the mountains and started planning things out loud. I wasn't trying to burn anything down. I just wanted the truth to live somewhere other than in my head. Somewhere it couldn't be ignored or rewritten. So I made coffee at 3:40 a.m., cleared a spot on the floor, and laid everything out: printouts, timestamps, names, chat logs, anomalies. I'd built hundreds of intel files before. This one felt more surgical. I started with the mission change. Madison's words. "We can't wait for her recon pass." That one sentence unraveled every excuse that followed. Then I tracked surrounding activity comms, logs, time delays, the blank spots in chain of command signatures. It wasn't just negligence, it was willful. And nobody had checked because nobody wanted to. I organized everything into a timeline: what was briefed, overridden, and not authorized. I highlighted discrepancies in red, the kind you don't see unless you know where to look. And I knew. I needed a second set of eyes. Someone outside the system, but not blind to it. I called Logan. He picked up after 3 rings, groggy. Hale? I hadn't heard his voice since the medevac. I found it, I said. He didn't ask what. He just said, "You want me to come up? Bring gloves. It's cold here." He showed up the next night, limping slightly but walking. He looked older, scar above his brow, heavier frame, but his eyes were sharp. He sat on the cabin floor like it was a war room and went through the file with me, page by page. He paused at the chat log. "This is enough," he said. "No," I replied. "It's the start." He stayed 3 nights. We worked in silence mostly, just breaking to eat or swear when something didn't align. He brought an old contact from Jag who owed him a favor. I sent the first packet to her via encrypted drop, unsigned, just labeled, for record correction consideration of it. Nightfall echo. 3 days later, we got a message back. Request acknowledged. Under internal review. Do not share publicly. Standard language, but not a shutdown. That was something. I wasn't out for headlines. I didn't want some viral tweet or congressional grandstanding. I wanted someone in a windowless office to sit with the facts and not be able to look away. We filed a second report with a supporting memo detailing 3 alternate decisions Madison could have made based on standard protocol. Each decision had a probable outcome. The numbers weren't abstract, they were names. Shaw, Hill, Baker. Every life had a timestamp. Every injury had a source. Once the submission was logged, I backed everything up 3 times, one to a cloud archive under a dummy login, one on a flash drive taped under the sink, and one on paper buried in a shipping box marked donated coats. I wasn't paranoid, I was thorough. Logan asked me what I wanted out of it. Her name doesn't have to be ruined, I said. But mine's not going to stay buried next to hers. You think they'll actually review it? I think if they don't, I'll keep pushing until they have to. He grinned. That's the captain I remember. I didn't smile back. Later, we sat on the porch, watching the wind pull snow across the yard in lazy waves. He turned to me, saying, "They treated you like a problem because you didn't flinch. They needed someone to flinch." I nodded. "I flinched," he added. "And you still dragged me out." "Doesn't mean I forgot," I said quietly. The next morning, he left. I watched his truck disappear down the mountain and felt something shift, not relief, not resolution, just gravity returning to the center. I went back inside and opened my inbox. One unread message. Subject line. Recommendation. Further investigation approved. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just stared at the screen, then shut the laptop. I needed air. The world hadn't changed. My name hadn't been cleared. But now, someone was listening. I didn't celebrate. I printed the report again, stapled every page, and walked it straight to the post office with my name on the return label this time. It felt risky, sure. But hiding behind burner emails and encrypted links hadn't protected me the first time. So this time, I wanted them to know who sent it. No more whispers. No more anonymous sources. My name was Eva Hale. A lie had torn apart my clearance, and I wasn't hiding. The package went to the Office of Military Ethics in D.C. It was addressed directly to Lieutenant Colonel Harriet Cross, the internal affairs officer known for reopening cold investigations when others wouldn't. I'd never met her, but I'd studied her decisions during my time at Fort Meade. She didn't blink at the chain of command. She blinked at the data. That's what I was counting on. The postmaster glanced at the envelope, thick, taped tight, official, and raised an eyebrow. Government? Personal, I said. He weighed it, stamped it, and slid it into a bin like it was nothing more than a birthday card. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because the stillness had weight now. It felt like something had shifted, and I couldn't afford to miss it. I watched headlights pass on the road below, counted trucks, and imagined how far the packet had traveled by now. I wondered who opened it first if they read every page. If they looked away. A week passed. No news. I bussied myself. Repainted the cabin walls even though they didn't need it. Cleaned the stove until it gleamed. Organized the screws in the utility drawer by head type and length. Every night, I opened my inbox like I was defusing a bomb. Nothing. Then, 12 days later, a new email slipped in. No subject line. Just a sender tag. OM. Internal Review 1. I clicked before I could think. One sentence. Formal review has been initiated. Interviews pending. New emotion, new acknowledgement, new apology. Just forward motion. And that was more than I'd gotten in a year. By the end of that week, I was contacted by a field investigator from OM named Keen. He spoke with a voice that didn't belong to a man who enjoyed his job, but he did it well. No small talk, no soft landings. Captain Hale, we're reopening Operation Nightfall Echo. I've been assigned your file. I kept my voice even. Good. Someone's already tried to suppress the internal memo you included. That's part of the problem. Not news. But hearing it out loud changed something. He continued. Captain Madison Hale has submitted a revised statement. She claims the early engagement time was mutually understood based on field conditions. Mutually understood? I said flatly. That's not what your logs say. And not what your signature timestamps reflect either. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He already knew. Keen said, we'll need your original deployment gear for analysis. Helmet cam, if you kept it. I did. And any backup drives? 2, I said. One's already in your office mailbox. He paused. You're thorough. I was trained that way. By the 3rd week, I received official notice. My name had been removed from the pending disciplinary action list. It's not cleared, just removed from the pile. 2 days after that, I got a call from Logan. They interviewed me, he said. And? I told them the truth. Every word of it. Did they ask about her? Hay hesitated. Yeah. And they didn't like what they heard. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Logan continued. They're building something, Eva. Quiet but real. That same afternoon, a second message arrived. This one was addressed to my old base account. Someone must have reactivated it. Subject, Field Status Reconsideration Input Request. It wasn't reinstatement. But it wasn't silence. For the first time since that night in the valley, I felt like my voice didn't vanish into static. It had left an impact. The kind that left paper trails. And trails meant others could follow. I walked that evening just down the edge of the frozen river. The wind cut hard, but my coat held. I thought about Sergeant Hill, thought about the sound of Logan screaming. Thought about the moment I signed the mission change form and what it cost me. And then I said something out loud, just once, just for myself. She knew. She knew, and she let it happen. The wind didn't answer. But it didn't blow the words away either. I walked back from the river with snow crunching under my boots, and by the time I reached the door, I knew exactly what I'd say if they called me back. 3 days later, the call came. Not an email, not a memo, a voice. Calm. Measured. This is Colonel Rayner with Office of Personnel Recovery. Captain Hale, are you available? Yes, I said. No hesitation. I'd like to begin by stating we've concluded the ethics review on Operation Nightfall Echo. Your clearance has been reinstated with full honors. Record amended. Silence. Not because I was shocked. I'd prepared for every word of that sentence. I just didn't know what to feel when it finally came. There's no ceremony for being unerased. You will be contacted within 72 hours with reassignment options, he continued. We are aware of your prior record in tactical intelligence and instruction. A transfer to officer development is being considered. Copy that. And Hale. Yes? Good work holding the line. Click. I stared at the phone. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it felt surgical. Precise. I'd been carrying like a sniper shot to the years of doubt. I didn't tell anyone. Not right away. I went for a run instead. Same dirt trail, same wind in my face. But the ground didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt solid. The offer came 2 days later. Fort Leon, North Dakota. Advanced Officer Training. Intel Division. I wouldn't be in combat, I'd be shaping those who would. I accepted in under 2 minutes. When I arrived on base, my uniform was waiting. Fresh pressed. No notes. General stars are not yet pinned, just the captain bars, which are polished and ready. The admin officer assigned to process me had a crooked smile and shook my hand like he'd known me 20 years. "We've heard about you," he said. Quiet fire. I didn't respond. That nickname had followed me before, but it was different now. Back then, it felt like a way to write me off without saying I was too quiet to lead. Now, it felt earned. My quarters were simple. Standard bunk. Footlocker. Blank white walls that begged for purpose. I hung a single photo, black and white, of my first unit in Kuwait. No medals. Just faces. Day 1 of instruction came fast. 20 cadets. All younger, mostly green. 2 women. One had a prosthetic hand. She met my eyes and didn't blink. I ran drills like I was prepping them for combat tomorrow. No fluff. No speeches. Just muscle, maps, data, instinct. And they listened. Not because I barked. Because I didn't have to. Word spreads fast. Captain Hale doesn't tolerate guessing and doesn't tolerate silence. You'll never pass the first week if you don't speak when something feels wrong. One evening after training, I was wiping down a whiteboard when a cadet approached. Mid-20s. Strong jaw. Unsteady posture. "Ma'am," she said, eyes sharp. "I almost dropped out last month. Thought I didn't belong here. Then someone forwarded me your case file. Said you took a hit for a call you didn't make." I looked at her. Didn't interrupt. "You made me realize this isn't about being perfect. It's about holding ground." I nodded once. She stepped back. "Thanks for not disappearing." I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because it caught in my throat. That was the first time someone thanked me without explaining why I hadn't deserved what happened. A week later, an envelope arrived. Heavy. Thick paper, gold trim. "You are cordially invited to the formal rank ceremony for Captain Madison Hale. Fort Dover Hall. Dress uniform required." I stared at the return address. It wasn't from Madison. It was from the department. I turned it over. Backside read, "All family encouraged to attend." Family. The word hit harder than the rank. I put the envelope on the desk and stared at it for a full minute. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. But I wasn't indifferent either. It wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't even an apology. It was an invitation to stand in the same room as the woman who'd almost buried me in silence and pretend it never happened. I ran a finger along the edge of the envelope. Then, I placed it carefully in my drawer beside the reinstatement letter and the first field commendation I had ever received. And I started ironing my uniform. I pressed every crease like I was sharpening a weapon I had no intention of drawing. The morning of the ceremony, I arrived earlier than I needed to, part habit, part instinct. Fort Dover looked precisely like a place built to make people feel small. Granite columns, flagpoles slicing the sky, everything polished to gleam but cold as concrete. I stood at the check-in desk and gave my name. Captain Eva Hale. A 1. The young enlisted guy with the clipboard scanned his list, frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the guest list." I raised an eyebrow. "I received an invitation. Official, department seal." "I don't doubt that," he said, professional but nervous. "But if you're not on here, I'm not authorized to let you through security." He stepped aside slightly as if he wasn't entirely comfortable blocking me but still doing his job. Behind him, through the tall glass doors, I could see movement. Officers in dress blues. A line forms near the stage. Applause somewhere deep inside the hall. And there, standing near the front, was Madison. Hair pinned up. Uniform sharp. Rank polished. My parents were beside her. Dad with a full chest of ribbons he hadn't earned in 20 years. Mom clutches her purse like it is part of the show. No one was scanning for me. No one noticed the space. I stood there, letting its weight settle. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd erased me. I nodded once to the officer at the door. Thanks. He looked uneasy. I could double-check with. No need. I turned on my heel and walked out. No scene, no flinching. My boots echoed against the polished floor, loud and confident. Outside, the wind had picked up. Flags snapped on their poles like warning shots. I crossed the lot to my car but didn't get in. Just stood there with my back to the ceremony, hands in my pockets. And then I heard the heavy door open behind me. Footsteps. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just precise. I turned halfway as a man in 4-star regalia walked out, head held high, coat decorated with rows of authority. 2 aides, both younger, flanked him and kept pace like this, which wasn't unusual. He spotted me instantly. Changed direction. Captain Hale, he said, voice calm and direct. I saluted out of instinct. He returned it sharp. I expected you inside, he said. They said I wasn't on the list. And a greeting. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. I read your file, he added. The full one. I held his gaze. Then you know I'm not here to make noise. He nodded once. Good, because it's not noise when it's earned. He stepped aside and motioned toward the doors. Come with me. I'm not here for her. You're not, he said. But they are. I walked back with him, every step quiet but grounded. When we entered, the room turned. Some stood taller, some went still. And some, like Madison, froze entirely. She was mid-conversation with a colonel, hand gesturing toward the stage. Then she saw me. Her mouth stopped moving, but her eyes didn't look away. Not yet. The general stepped forward to the podium and tapped the mic once. The room softened to a hush. There's been a correction to the program, he said, voice steady. Before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge someone whose leadership is the reason many in this room are even standing today. He paused, then looked at me. Captain Eva Hale. Silence hit like pressure. Then applause. Light at first, scattered, but it grew. Not a roar, but real. Real enough that Madison's head turned slightly toward her shoes. I didn't step on stage, didn't wave. I just stood straight, hands at my sides, eyes locked forward. They hadn't written my name down, but they remembered it now. As the ceremony continued, I moved to the back of the room. No seat, just a wall at my spine. I watched Madison take the stage and accept her promotion. She didn't stumble, she didn't cry. She looked like every picture-perfect photo from our childhood, mantle calculated, contained, applauded. When it was over, people filtered out like clockwork. Laughter, champagne, polished shoes, and tight smiles. I stayed where I was. Let them pass. Let them whisper. Until only a few of us remained. Madison approached me slowly, uniform, perfect, expression unreadable. She stopped about 3 feet away. You came. They sent me an invitation, I said. But not from me, she added. He tilted my head. I noticed. She glanced down and adjusted her cuff. I didn't think you'd show. I didn't answer. Madison looked up again. What happened? It wasn't supposed to go like that. I studied her face. It wasn't. I thought I could fix it before it spiraled. I was trying to protect. Yourself, I cut in, calm. You were trying to protect yourself. That. She didn't deny it. She just stood there. I'm not here for an apology, I said. And I'm definitely not here for a reunion. She nodded once. You erased me, I added. And you thought the silence would stay on your side. I was wrong. You were. A beat passed. Madison said, so what now? I turned toward the door. Now? I go home. And I walked out, leaving behind the sound of nothing worth staying for. I didn't look back, not because it hurt, but because I'd already seen everything I needed to. Outside, the air hit differently. Cleaner. Sharper. Like it had waited to exhale until I was out of that room. I crossed the parking lot slowly, letting each step feel like mine again. Not rushed. Not stolen. Just mine. And then I heard it. Boots behind me. Fast. Hesitant. Eva, wait. I stopped but didn't turn. Madison's voice again. Just. Wait a second. I turned halfway. Why? She stood about 10 feet away, arms folded like she wasn't sure what to do with her hands anymore. The same uniform, but it didn't carry her the same way now. Her posture was tight, controlled but off. Like she'd rehearsed strength so long she'd forgotten how to be anything else. You came to humiliate me, she said, not as a question. No, I replied, flat. You did that yourself. I just showed up. You know what I meant. I turned to face her fully now. Then asked the real question. Madison stared at me for a long beat. The wind kicked at her hair, but she didn't move. Do you hate me? He didn't blink. No. She looked almost disappointed. Then what do you feel? I stepped forward once, not closing the gap just enough to land the truth where it belonged. I feel like I spent my entire life standing quietly behind you while you soaked up applause for things I did too. Sometimes better. I feel like when the one time I needed you to speak up, you went quiet to save your career. And I feel like if I'd been the one who walked into that blast and died, you would have worn the grief like a badge. But you wouldn't have told the truth. Madison flinched but didn't interrupt. I kept going. You were raised to win. I was raised to behave. You called that balance. I call it convenient. She looked down, then back up. I didn't know how to believe you. That stopped me. I didn't expect honesty. Because believing me would have meant admitting you weren't the only one who mattered, I said. She nodded slowly as if even that took effort. You're right. The words were so soft I almost missed them. But I wanted to matter too, she added. That was never the problem, I said. The problem was you thought only one of us could. Silence stretched between us like a wire. Madison took a breath like she wanted to say something else, some final line to redeem it all. I beat her to it. You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself the truth. Say it out loud, just once, and maybe you'll stop running from it. She looked at me then. Looked. Like she saw something she hadn't let herself see before. I walked away. Again. And this time, she didn't follow. Across the street was a bench facing the open field beyond the base. I sat. Let the cold settle around my shoulders. A few officers passed by, and some glanced at me. One or two gave that quick nod reserved for someone they knew they'd seen somewhere but couldn't quite place. Then I heard a voice from behind. Captain Hale? I turned. A young cadet couldn't have been more than 23 stood there in full uniform, backpack slung off one shoulder. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. I read about you. The inquiry, the suspension, the reinstatement. All of it. I tilted my head slightly. That's not usually the kind of story they post on recruitment posters. She smiled nervously. It's the reason I didn't quit. That caught me off guard. I thought if someone could survive that and still put the uniform back on, then maybe I could survive OCS. I didn't have words for a moment. Just nodded. Anyway, she added, I hope you know what you did mattered. She turned and walked off before I could say anything. I watched her disappear around the corner of the building, boots hitting the pavement like she belonged there. And I felt something shift in my chest, not pride. Not relief, just stillness. The kind I hadn't felt in years. I didn't need Madison's approval. Or my father's. Or a seat at their table. I'd built my own. And somehow, even with everything they took from me, I still had enough left to pull someone else out of the fire. No medal ever meant that much. I sat there longer, letting the quiet settle, not like absence, but like clarity finally taking up space. At some point, I stood. Not because I had to. Just because I wanted to leave under my terms. I passed through the outer gates of Fort Dover like someone finishing a shift they didn't ask for but showed up to anyway. A black sedan waited near the edge of the lot. Not government-plated, but clean. It's too polished for civilians. Inside, my father sat in the back. I stopped a few feet away. He rolled the window down. You have a minute? He asked. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and got in. The driver pulled off like this was scheduled. Like there was some kind of protocol for this when it was just unfinished business wrapped in formality. We didn't speak for the first few miles. The road out of the base twisted along an old fencing and cleared forest. Every inch of it is familiar. Finally, he said, "You looked sharp in there." I looked out the window. "Doesn't matter how I look." "You're right," he said after a pause. "It matters how you stood." I glanced at him. He was older now, less edge. More weight in the shoulders, but still sitting like a man who wasn't used to being questioned. "You always thought I was soft," I said. "No," he replied. "I thought you were silent." "That's not the same." I nodded. "But you treated it like it was." He didn't argue. "I was wrong," he said. "About a lot of things. Mostly about what strength looks like." I folded my arms. "You only say that now because it's official. I've got my clearance back. My name's clean." "That's not why I say it," he said. "But I get why you'd think that." He took a breath as if the following words were heavier. "I let Madison run the show because she made noise. You made impact, but you never demanded attention. That scared me more than I admitted. You didn't ask to be seen, so I didn't look." I turned my head toward him. "And now you want forgiveness?" "No," he said. "I'm not asking for that." "Good," I said. "Because I'm not giving it." We rode in silence again. Not bitter. Just real. After a while, I asked, "Why no?" "Because I heard how you spoke in there," he said. "And it reminded me of everything I ignored." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed at the edges. I knew what it was before he even handed it over. My West Point application. Unmailed. Unopened. I took it. Unfolded it with slow hands. My signature is still neat. Essay printed in bold font. A little childish, a little too formal. But mine. "I kept it," he said. "You buried it." He nodded. "Yeah." I ran a finger along the fold. I thought this was the end of the road for me back then. Like the whole world closed a door and swallowed the key. And now? I folded the paper again. Now I know I never needed a key. We pulled into a rest stop. He gestured to the diner inside. "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" he asked. "No," I said, opening the door. "But you can sit while I drink mine." Inside, we sat across from each other at a corner booth. He didn't talk much, just stirred his coffee like he was waiting for something he wouldn't get. I didn't fill the silence. I wasn't interested in fixing what never had a blueprint. But when I finished my mug, I slid it aside and met his eyes. "You taught me that loyalty defines family," I said. "But you broke that rule before I ever did." He didn't flinch. He nodded. And that was enough. Not forgiveness. Not healing. Just acknowledgement. I stood up. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. He looked up. "I'm just done shrinking to fit people who won't stretch to meet me." I walked out before he could respond. The door chimed behind me. The cold wind hit my face again. This time, it felt clean. Not because I'd won. Because I wasn't fighting for space anymore. I was taking it. I didn't go home, I drove past it, past everything that used to mean something, until the only thing left on the road was mine. The drive took hours. I didn't play music. Didn't take calls. Just asphalt and wind and the occasional road sign I didn't bother to read. The silence wasn't empty, it was earned. And I wasn't running. I was moving. I stopped at a lookout point somewhere in northern Wyoming. The sun was cutting through the clouds in streaks, not soft, not dramatic, just present. It looked like it had shown up without an invitation. I leaned on the car's hood and let the cold air sting my face. Nobody knew I was here. And that was the point. I thought about everything that had brought me to this place. Not the events, those were loud and easy. It was the in-between that stayed with me. The months no one talks about. The mornings that came with no orders. The nights where I wrote reports for a command that didn't want my name on them. The days when the only salute I got was from my reflection in a gas station mirror. You learn something in those moments. You learn that justice, when it shows up, isn't shiny. It's not a medal or a parade. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who never listened in the first place. I thought I needed them to say my name. It turns out that I just needed to remember it for myself. A week later, I was back at Fort Elms. The base had shifted since the promotion, but not because of me. I was still just another officer in boots and a uniform. But something in the way people looked at me had changed. Not awe, not fear, just recognition. They didn't salute the story. They saluted the survivor. The cadets in my unit had started calling me Captain Hale again, but with a weight behind it, like the title finally fits the woman. During a leadership simulation, I watched a young lieutenant candidate freeze up one afternoon. The scenario was built to fail bad intel, missing comms, high pressure. She lost her nerve and stared at the table as it betrayed her. The other cadets looked at me, waiting for the reprimand. Instead, I walked over, pulled a chair, and sat across from her. I didn't say anything at first. Then I asked, "What do you think I'm going to do right now?" She swallowed hard. "Tell me I blew it." "You did," I said plainly. "But so did I. More times than I care to count. Once, it almost killed 3 men. 1 didn't make it." She blinked, not expecting that. "The difference?" I added. "I learned how to read the table instead of just trying to win at it." She nodded. "What do you mean, read the table?" "Some rooms are built to remind you you're smaller," I said. "That doesn't mean they're right, it just means someone else paid for the furniture. Build your own table and make damn sure you know who's allowed to sit at it." Later that day, she taped a quote to her locker. "Build your own table." I didn't say a word about it. But when I saw it, I smiled. Word got around. Young soldiers started showing up at my office not to complain or vent, just to ask how to lead when nobody's watching or hold ground when your name's not in lights. How do you stay when the system tries to spit you out? I never gave them easy answers. But I gave them honest ones. And for the first time, it felt like that was enough. One night, after drills, I sat in the mess hall alone. Tray cleared. Lights half dimmed. A colonel from another unit walked in, gave me a slight nod, and sat down a few tables. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. I watched a young officer walk past him, pause, reevaluate, and shake his hand. She introduced herself nervous but steady. He smiled, stood, and offered her a seat. That's when I realized. I used to think justice looked like someone paying for what they did. Now I know justice is when the next woman doesn't have to fight the same war twice. Before I left for the night, I wrote one sentence on the whiteboard in my office. You don't need a nameplate to take up space. Just don't apologize for being in the room. I didn't sign it. Didn't have to. My boots had walked through fire, but they were still under me. My name had been erased, but it was louder now than ever. I had nothing left to prove and everything left to build. No one gets to write your story for you. And if they forget your name, make them remember the table you built. And remind them they don't get a seat unless they've earned it. I don't walk into rooms waiting to be seen anymore. I walk in knowing I belong whether they clap or not. They once told me I was too quiet to lead, too careful to command, too invisible to matter. But here's the truth no one teaches you. You don't need their spotlight to stand tall, you just need to stop shrinking. And if the room still won't make space for you, build your table. Sit at the head, speak with clarity, and never ever apologize for taking up space you earned. If stories like this hit close to home where family drama cuts deeper than any battlefield, and quiet revenge speaks louder than applause, go ahead and subscribe. We tell real, raw revenge stories that don't ask for pity, just the truth. Stick around. You might just find your voice in someone else's silence.